Swedish. Fröken Julie is a naturalistic play written in 1888 by August Strindberg. It is set on Midsummer's Eve in the following morning, which is Midsummer and the feast day of Saint John the Baptist. The setting is an estate of a count in Sweden. Miss Julie is drawn to a senior servant, a valet named Jean, who is well-traveled and well-read. The action takes place in the kitchen of Miss Julie's father's manor, where Jean's fiancée, a servant named Christine, cooks and sometimes sleeps while Jean and Miss Julie talk. Johann August Strindberg, Stern D. Burr, 1 Swedish. Strindberg listen, the 22nd of January 1849, 14 May 1912, was a Swedish playwright, novelist, poet, essayist and painter. 2, 3, 4 A prolific writer who often drew directly on his personal experience, Strindberg wrote more than 60 plays and more than 30 works of fiction, autobiography, history, cultural analysis, and politics during his career, which spanned 4 decades. 5 A bold experimenter and iconoclast throughout, he explored a wide range of dramatic methods and purposes, from naturalistic tragedy, monodrama, and history plays, to his anticipations of expressionist and surrealist dramatic techniques. 6, 7 From his earliest work, Strindberg developed innovative forms of dramatic action, language, and visual composition. 8 He is considered the father of modern Swedish literature, and his The Red Room 1879 has frequently been described as the first modern Swedish novel. 9, 10 In Sweden, Strindberg is known as an essayist, painter, poet, and especially as a novelist and playwright, but in other countries he is known mostly as a playwright. The Royal Theatre rejected his first major play, Master Olaf, in 1872. It was not until 1881, when he was 32, that its premiere at the New Theatre gave him his theatrical breakthrough. 2, 11 In his plays The Father 1887, Miss Julie 1888, and Creditors 1889, he created naturalistic dramas that, building on the established accomplishments of Henrik Ibsen's prose problem plays while rejecting their use of the structure of the well-made play, responded to the call to arms of Émile Zola's manifesto, Naturalism in the Theatre, 1881, and the example set by André Antoine's newly established Théâtre Libre, opened 1887. 12 In Miss Julie, characterization replaces plot as the predominant dramatic element, in contrast to melodrama and the well-made play, and the determining role of heredity and the environment on the vacillating, disintegrated characters is emphasized. 13 Strindberg modeled his short-lived Scandinavian experimental theater 1889 in Copenhagen on Antoine's theater, and he explored the theory of naturalism in his essays On Psychic Murder, 1887, On Modern Drama and the Modern Theater, 1889, and a preface to Miss Julie, the last of which is probably the best-known statement of the principles of the theatrical movement. 14. During the 1890s he spent significant time abroad engaged in scientific experiments and studies of the occult. 15. A series of apparent psychotic attacks between 1894 and 1896, referred to as his Inferno crisis, led to his hospitalization and return to Sweden. 15. Under the influence of the ideas of Emanuel Swedenborg, he resolved after his recovery to become the Zola of the occult. 16. In 1898 he returned to playwriting with To Damascus, which, like The Great Highway 1909, is a dream play of spiritual pilgrimage. 17. His A Dream Play 1902, with its radical attempt to dramatize the workings of the unconscious by means of an abolition of conventional dramatic time and space and the splitting, doubling, merging, and multiplication of its characters, was an important precursor to both Expressionism and surrealism. 18. He also returned to writing historical drama, the genre with which he had begun his playwriting career. 19. He helped to run the Intimate Theater from 1907, a small-scale theater, modeled on Max Reinhardt's Kammerspielhaus, that staged his chamber plays such as The Ghost Sonata. 20. Darwinism is a theory of biological evolution developed by the English naturalist Charles Darwin 1809-1882, and others, stating that all species of organisms arise and develop through the natural selection of small, inherited variations that increase the individual's ability to compete, survive, and reproduce. Also called Darwinian theory, it originally included the broad concepts of transmutation of species or of evolution, which gained general scientific acceptance after Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859, including concepts which predated Darwin's theories. English biologist Thomas Henry Huxley coined the term Darwinism in April 1860. 1. One theme of the play is Darwinism. 1-2, a theory that was a significant influence on the author during his naturalistic period. This theme is stated explicitly in the preface, where Strindberg describes his two lead characters, Miss Julie and Jean, as vying against each other in an evolutionary, life and death, battle for a survival of the fittest. The character of Miss Julie represents the last of a dying aristocratic breed and serves to characterize women in modernity. Jean represents one who is clambering upwards and who is fitter to thrive because he is more adaptable in terms of the life roles he can take on. The play has various themes, partly because Miss Julie's actions are motivated by a range of factors and influences: her class, her desires and impulsive nature, her father, and the dynamic traumas of her family histories. In utilizing the naturalistic style, the author goes against the dominant theatrical idea that says that characters should be written with only one primary motivation. 3-4. Miss Julie is preceded by an author's preface, which is considered a significant manifesto of naturalism in the theater. In it, Strindberg states that the source of the play is an actual story he once heard, which made a strong impression on him, and which seemed appropriate for tragedy, for it still seems tragic to see someone favored by fortune go under, much more to see a family die out. 5. Strindberg describes both Jean and Miss Julie as representations of their classes in society. The people in the play are described by Strindberg as modern characters living in an age of transition, more vacillating and disintegrating than their predecessors, a mixture of the old and the new. 6. The preface to the play may not be the best guide to the play, and is at times in variance with the play itself. The prefaces urges naturalism and deterministic readings of the play, but the play seems to offer more anti-naturalism and even feminist readings. Strindberg's play may have other values than his own critical assessment. 7. In the preface, Strindberg discusses aristocracy and classism beyond what occurs in the play itself. Strindberg wrote this play with the intention of abiding by the theories of naturalism, both his own version, and also the version described by the French novelist and literary theoretician Émile Zola. Zola's term for naturalism is la nouvelle formule. The three primary principles of naturalism, faire vrai, faire grand and faire simple, are: faire vrai. The play should be realistic and the result of a careful study of human behavior and psychology. The characters should be flesh and blood, their motivations and actions should be grounded in their heredity and environment. The presentation of the play in terms of the setting and performances should be realistic and not flamboyant or theatrical. The single setting of Miss Julie, for example, is a kitchen. Faire grand. The conflicts in the play should be issues of meaningful, life-altering significance, not small or petty. Faire simple. The play should be simple, not cluttered with complicated subplots or lengthy expositions. Strindberg believed that French playwrights had been unable to achieve naturalism in their writings, and he felt that he could. Miss Julie is not only successful as a naturalistic drama, but it is a play that has achieved the rare distinction of being performed on stages all over the world every year since it was written in 1888. 8. The play was written as Strindberg was creating a new theater of his own, the Scandinavian Naturalistic Theater, which would be founded in Copenhagen. Miss Julie would be the premiere offering. Strindberg's wife, Siri von Essen, would star in the title role, and she would also be the artistic director. After Strindberg agreed to a small amount of censorship, the play was published a few weeks before the first production. The first English translations also contain these censored excisions. For example, the first audiences were spared the shock of hearing Miss Julie, in an angry moment, compare making love to Jean to an act of bestiality. With disastrous timing for new theater, the censors announced during the dress rehearsal that Miss Julie would be forbidden. However, Strindberg managed to get around the censors by having Miss Julie premiere a few days later at the Copenhagen University Student Union. 9-10. Miss Julie, strong-willed daughter of the count who owns the estate. Raised by her late mother to think like and act like a man, she is a confused individual. She is aware of the power she holds, but switches between being above the servants and flirting with Jean, her father's manservant. She longs to fall from her pillar, an expression symbolically put across as a recurring dream she has. Jean, manservant to the count. He tells a story of seeing Miss Julie many times as a child and loving her even then, but the truth of the story is later denied. There is good evidence both for and against its veracity. Jean left the town and traveled widely, working many different jobs as he went, before finally returning to work for the count. He has aspirations to rise from his station in life and manage his own hotel, and Miss Julie is part of his plan. He is alternately kind and callous. Despite his aspirations, he is rendered servile by the mere sight of the count's gloves and boots. Christine, the cook in the Count's household. She is devoutly religious and apparently betrothed to Jean, although they refer to this marriage almost jokingly. The Count, Miss Julie's father. He is never seen, but his gloves and his boots are on stage, serving as a reminder of his power. When a bell sounds, his presence is also noted more strongly. Summary. The play opens with Jean walking on the stage, the set being the kitchen of the manor. He drops the Count's boots off to the side but still within view of the audience. His clothing shows that he is a valet. Jean talks to Christine about Miss Julie's peculiar behavior. He considers her mad since she went to the barn dance, danced with the gamekeeper, and tried to waltz with Jean, a mere servant of the Count. Christine delves into the background of Miss Julie, stating how, unable to face her family after the humiliation of breaking her engagement, she stayed behind to mingle with the servants at the dance instead of going with her father to the Midsummer's Eve celebrations. Miss Julie got rid of her fiancé seemingly because he refused her demand that he jump over a riding whip she was holding. The incident, apparently witnessed by Jean, was similar to training a dog to jump through a hoop. Jean takes out a bottle of fine wine with a yellow seal, and reveals, by the way he flirts with her, that he and Christine are engaged. Noticing a stench, Jean asks what Christine is cooking so late on Midsummer's Eve. The pungent mixture turns out to be an abortifacient for Miss Julie's dog, which was impregnated by the gatekeeper's mongrel. Jean calls Miss Julie, too stuck up in some ways and not proud enough in others, traits apparently inherited from her mother. Despite her character flaws, Jean finds Miss Julie beautiful or perhaps simply a stepping stone to achieve his lifelong goal of owning an inn. When Miss Julie enters and asks Christine if the meal has finished cooking, Jean instantly shapes up, becoming charming and polite. Jokingly, he asks if the women are gossiping about secrets or making a witch's broth for seeing Miss Julie's future suitor. After more niceties, Miss Julie invites Jean once more to dance the waltz, at which point he hesitates, pointing out that he already promised Christine a dance and that the gossip generated by such an act would be savage. Almost offended by this response, she justifies her request by pulling rank. She is the lady of the house and must have the best dancer as her partner. Then, insisting that rank does not matter, she convinces Jean to waltz with her. When they return, Miss Julie recounts a dream of climbing up a pillar and being unable to get down. Jean responds with a story of creeping into her walled garden as a child. He sees it as the Garden of Eden, guarded by angry angels with flaming swords, and gazing at her longingly from under a pile of stinking weeds. He says he was so distraught with this unrequited love, after seeing her at a Sunday church service, that he tried to die beautifully and pleasantly by sleeping in a bin of oats strewn with elderflowers, as sleeping under an elder tree was thought to be dangerous. At this point Jean and Miss Julie notice some servants heading up to the house, singing a song that mocks the pair of them. They hide in Jean's room. Although Jean swears he won't take advantage of her there, when they emerge later it becomes clear that the two have had sex. Now they are forced to figure out how to deal with it, as Jean theorizes that they can no longer live in the same household. He feels they will be tempted to continue their relationship until they are caught. Now he confesses that he was only pretending when he said he had tried to commit suicide out of love of her. Furiously, Miss Julie tells him of how her mother raised her to be submissive to no man. They then decide to run away together to start a hotel, with Jean running it and Miss Julie providing the capital. Miss Julie agrees and steals some of her father's money, but angers Jean when she insists on bringing her little bird along. She insists that it is the only creature that loves her, after her dog Diana was unfaithful to her. When Miss Julie insists that she would rather kill the bird than see it in the hands of strangers, Jean cuts off its head. In the midst of this confusion, Christine comes downstairs, ready to go to church. She is shocked by Jean and Miss Julie's planning and unmoved when Miss Julie asks her to come along with them as head of the kitchen of the hotel. Christine explains to Miss Julie about God and forgiveness and heads off for church, telling them as she leaves that she will tell the stable masters not to let them take out any horses so that they cannot run off. Shortly after, they receive word that Miss Julie's father, the Count, has returned. At this, both lose courage and find themselves unable to go through with their plans. Miss Julie realizes that she has nothing to her name, as her thoughts and emotions were taught to her by her mother and her father. She asks Jean if he knows of any way out for her. He takes a shaving razor and hands it to her. The play ends as she walks through the door with the razor, presumably to commit suicide.